that we have to understand that we're seeing a glimpse, we're seeing a moment. So I'm going to share with you a story that I have about a client quickly. We were having this conversation not too long ago. He makes really good money. And he's just at a breaking point. I mean, like, this guy was very exhausted at this thought that he sees his peers, or not even his peers, like people in his community. He has kids. He sees other parents at his parents' school functions, and they have like the nicer car. They're taking the trips. It's all on social media. They're doing all these things, and he can't do it. He's just like, Brandon, how can so many people making less money than me be able to do all these things, and I can't seem to afford to be able to do this stuff?
Yeah.
And he's frustrated. He's angry. He's sad. It's pure emotion. It's envy. And what he already knows, what I just had to remind him of, and like just kind of put his feet on the ground, was you are only seeing those pictures or those 60-second stories.
Yeah.
You're not seeing all the other decisions that they're making in their life. What's up? Welcome to Money Therapy, and we're glad you're here. I am one of your hosts, Brandan Chasteen, and this is my trusty, faithful partner,
Bill Magill.
Bill. How you doing?
Good.
Life's hectic, right? Life is busy. So we're excited kind of to pause and just sit in this for a minute and slow our brains down to think about some singular things. Man, I've been having a lot of conversations lately, and I think it boils down to this notion that we've talked about before, and it's just this idea of comparing ourselves to others.
Yeah.
But it's detrimental, and trying to continue on, because every time I think about, like, every time I have this conversation with someone, and we'll get into the conversations that I've had just in the past week, I'm starting to listen for it more, and I start hearing even just like friends and family kind of doing the same thing.
Really?
And my brain is just like, that's a comparison. It exists everywhere. We were talking in pre-show, and I said it's really important that we differentiate something. So when we're dealing with emotions and with behavior, we're dealing with just being human beings.
Sure.
And there's no possible way to give enough like life hacks to make our listeners never have to deal with the negative emotions of life, right? Like, you're going to deal with this stuff.
Sure.
The outcome is not to not deal with it or to not experience it. The outcome is to be aware and kind of have this like emergency checklist that you can go to when you notice this emotion. If you can become self-aware of emotions that are potentially detrimental, and then you can say, hey, when I feel this way, I'm going to do this. You're going to come out better than like 99% of the population.
Correct.
So what is it that we're talking about today? We're really going to jump into the word envy and how it is just, it'll derail any financial progress plan or whatever. You can't achieve financial success or financial independence and be envious without having some sort of control over that emotion.
Yeah.
So we're going to dig in it. In the email we sent out on Sunday, we just talked about this op-ed that was in the New York Times, and it was this is from 2014, but the opening line of this article says, in my last year on Wall Street, my bonus was $3.6 million, and I was angry because it wasn't big enough.
I would have been angry too.
How do you, have a $3.6 million payday?
Yeah.
And you're mad. Where in the world are you in life?
Yeah.
To have that reaction? And that's, it's kind of gross and disgusting, but it's also really sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one thing that comes to mind is when I hear that is you got to be careful on how you define success. And I think this will tie back into envy. But where are you going in life? What do you think, we talk about this concept a lot. How much is enough? What are your goals? All these things that we have conversations about. And it's all in an effort for the most part to define what your idea of success is, because I think most people hearing that story would say, yeah, what is wrong with that person? But if he was going for 10 million, he is an epic failure, in terms of his goal and what he wanted. And we talked about this, a couple weeks ago. We know people that have more money than they'll ever need, and they're terrified mostly of losing it all. Or we have people that are living so close to the edge. It's unbelievable. And they're happy as a clam. They have no idea. And they're just kind of bumping along in life.
I saw a meme on one of the socials. I was scrolling, and it just showed this guy sitting up against a tree kind of in the woods. And it said, somewhere there's somebody that's been in the woods for years without any kind of social media, and they're so happy.
Yeah.
Yeah. But to your point in that op-ed, it was a lot like he didn't necessarily have the goal. So the only way he could justify how he felt, or the only way that he could come up with how he was going to feel about receiving $3.6 million was to look at other people in his role in companies like his.
Yeah.
And they were all getting bigger checks. So he was mad because they all received it when, he goes on in the op-ed to like quit Wall Street.
Yeah.
Because eventually he took a second. He was like, this is not okay. Like, I don't enjoy being angry after receiving 3.6 million. This isn't a healthy environment for me to live in. So he went away and got kind of a more normal job.
Which is impressive.
And that's, he was aware that he felt a certain way, didn't think it was productive to his health, his life, his family, all the things that actually mattered to him.
Yeah.
So he stepped back and said, how do I change this behavior, or how do I mitigate it? How do I reduce my exposure to being, envious of other people?
Yeah.
I remove myself. And sometimes that's it, right? Like, once we become aware of what can trigger us to be envious.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's having the emotional IQ to just be aware and be like, hey, I'm feeling this way and I need to do these steps to get rid of it. But also, sometimes you don't have that wherewithal to one, acknowledge and be aware, and two, to have the time or the energy it takes to work through a process to get rid of envy.
Yeah.
So what do? You say, hey, well, I'm triggered every time I do this, so I'm just going to stay away from that. And that's one of the ways that we can reduce envy in life, is saying, hey, when I see, Bill walk in his nice outfit and I get envious, I'm going to stop seeing Bill walk in his outfit, right? There's things that you can just say, hey, it's not always possible.
Sure.
You're going to walk in the office. I'm going to see you. So obviously I'm going to have to do something different.
And when you're this good looking, it's hard not to be envious.
Face for podcasting.
Yeah. But I think to jump in here, I think the underlying thread there is the opportunity to choose. You have a choice. Mm-hmm. And I think, this whole episode's going to be about how to avoid envy and how to do all these things. And that can be very practical advice, but the idea of what you said earlier, we're all going to feel these emotions. And then if you get good enough at recognizing, hey, I'm going through this emotion, and you can take a look at the circumstances around you, you then have the opportunity to choose what you do about it, what you think about it. Mm-hmm. This reminds me of a story from one of my favorite books, and I've mentioned it on the podcast before, but it's called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F. Okay. Mm-hmm. And he talks about the story pretty much exactly that, defining your success and choosing how you want to look at your life and what does success mean to you. And he tells these parallel stories. One story was about I believe the drummer from Metallica, right before Metallica blew up and took off. And they pretty ruthlessly fired him from the band. No explanation, no nothing. Just one day showed up to his hotel and said, "You're gone." And that guy became instantly mad, as I'm sure a lot of us would be, and basically dedicated the rest of his life to trying to outdo Metallica. And he actually became the founder of the other band Megadeth, which I'm not a huge metal rock band guy, but Megadeth was hugely successful,
Right.
sold 30 million albums, all these things. But the problem was Metallica sold like 65 million or something astronomically huge. So he defined his success as, I need to beat Metallica. And it was just, for his circumstances, unrealistic. I mean, Metallica obviously took off like a rocket ship, and that only happens every once in a while. The other parallel story, so he spent the rest of his life pretty much mad at all of his past buddies in Metallica and trying to get back at them and do better than them. The parallels,
Just never satisfied.
Just never satisfied. Yeah. Chasing something that he just was never going to be able to do.
Envious.
The parallel story to that, the vice versa, if you will, was one of the band members with the Beatles. Right before the Beatles took off, they decided to replace him with Ringo Starr. Mm-hmm. And instead of choosing to be envious, and then, imagine that you get fired and then the Beatles become the Beatles. How crazy is that? But instead of choosing to be envious, instead of choosing to be vindictive and trying to outdo the Beatles for the rest of his life, the guy went and started a family. I think he became a teacher, if I remember correctly, had this completely different life than a rock star lifestyle. And interviewed years and years later, the guy from Megadeth, again, still vindictive, interviewing the guy from, the Beatles in the beginning years and years later, super happy with his life. He actually said, the quote in the book is, getting cut from the Beatles was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Wow. Yeah.
And just had this really fulfilling life, raised a family, did all those things, because that's what was important to him. So within that is the lesson of, again, you get to choose how you look at things. Things are going to happen in your life, and they will bring out these emotions that sometimes you're not going to be able to control those emotions. You're going to feel the envy, the hate, the being personally attacked, or betrayed, whatever it is. But then you get to choose what the future looks like after that and how you're going to perceive it.
So what we're going to do here is back in, we're going to spend the next few minutes, clearly outlining what we're calling the envy trap.
Yeah.
We're going to give you some real financial impact kind of comparisons there. And then after that, we're going to give you a few tricks or tips or just some advice. It's nothing super earth shattering, but we're going to give you a little bit of our methodology that when we coach our clients, we're saying, hey, if this is obviously a problem for you, here's some solutions or here's some things to implement that could, one, make you aware of when you're feeling envious, and some proactive ways to reduce the potential of the negative consequences of being envious, right? How do we deal with it instead of react to it? So with that, I want to jump into a few things here. So let's define as best we can what envy is, what causes it, and why, honestly, it's an uphill battle in the society that we live in. And while you're listening to this, I want you to just if you can, even if you have to pause a couple of times, really stop for a second and think, how is this true for me? Because if you're listening to this and you don't ever feel envious, one, I want you on the podcast or let's go get coffee. But if that's not the case,
you need to be studied.
I would bet you just need to spend some time and be honest with yourself, because the fact is that we're all guilty of being envious, comparing ourselves to others from time to time at some point in our life. So that's what we're going to jump into. Envy. So I got some notes. one thing I want to mention before we get started, season 2, episode 10, we try to discuss how much is enough. So back to your story, starting with your own definition of what success is, and we'll circle back to that in a minute. But if you want to listen more about this topic, you can go listen to season 2, episode 10. I'll put that in the show notes as well. I'll link to it. So envy, universal. It's been around for generations and generations in different societies. It's proven that there's evidence of, like, whether you're looking at like caste systems or, giving credence to like, just hierarchical structure in our societies. There's always something that we want more of. And that can be very, very basic material things.
Sure.
It could be safety and things that we need to keep ourselves alive.
Yeah.
It could be wealth and money and finance. It could be power. It could be personal attributes, right? Like if you look back even to like the old Greek societies and the sculptures of like the just ripped, fit dudes, there was a certain attribute that people wanted, they aspired to. And if they didn't have it, they were jealous of it, right? And we still deal with that stuff today. It hasn't changed at all. In our current society, and why I think that any uphill battle that's existed before is now just like a steeper mountain that we have to fight up, is a lot of what envy is generated from is just social comparisons.
Sure.
And with social media, we're inundated. With these like 60 seconds or still frame glimpses into a moment of someone's life that looks really cool, makes them look really happy, and we want that.
Yeah.
And we're just like, every time we scroll, we're seeing it again and again and again. And so social media provides constant opportunities for comparison, and it only intensifies that feeling of envy. These things that we feel, we start to internalize. Those like neurosynapses in our brain start to really get deep roots, and it starts to take over in so many different aspects that eventually we're not seeing something and becoming envious. We're seeing something and like confirming why we're envious. Oh man, a new thought is like, hey, I wish I could buy that car.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. For me, it's, man, that's a beautiful mountain. Like, why can't I be there? It's like, well, I have to work sometimes.
Right. And then after so many times of seeing that, because we get in these certain algorithms and we're seeing it all the time, after so many times, then it's just like, yeah, everybody's out to get me. I could never have that. Right. Yeah. It just increases that self-defeating attitude.
Yeah, it could definitely turn into that.
But so, like, I think the important thing here is I think every listener is at this point, and if you have kids, I think it's so important to talk to your kids about this when it comes to social media, that we have to understand that we're seeing a glimpse, we're seeing a moment. So I'm going to share with you a story that I have about a client quickly. We were having this conversation not too long ago. He makes really good money. And he's just at a breaking point. I mean, like, this guy was very exhausted at this thought that he sees his peers, or not even his peers, like people in his community. He has kids. He sees other parents at his parents' school functions, and they have like the nicer car. They're taking the trips. It's all on social media. They're doing all these things, and he can't do it. He's just like, Brandon, how can so many people making less money than me be able to do all these things, and I can't seem to afford to be able to do this stuff?
Yeah.
And he's frustrated, he's angry, he's sad. It's pure emotion. It's envy. And what he already knows, what I just had to remind him of, and like just kind of put his feet on the ground, was, you are only seeing those pictures or those 60-second stories.
Yeah.
You're not seeing all the other decisions that they're making in their life. You have a very personal financial plan. You are choosing to strive for like this work optional life early as early as you possibly can.
Yeah.
So you're currently putting 20% into future savings. You are currently paying and maximizing your insurance. You're doing all of these things to make your family extremely safe.
Yeah.
You're reducing your debt. You're increasing your net worth. You are going to achieve financial independence.
Sure.
That other person that's posting the 3 trips, I have no idea.
Yeah.
And you don't either. And I was looking at a stat this morning that the New York Fed put out that said credit card defaults have increased to like 6.9%.
Yeah.
And that's the highest it's been since pre-pandemic.
That's crazy.
People are spending right now on credit. And that's scary for a whole lot of other reasons.
Yeah.
And not only are they spending on credit, they can't afford to pay the bills because interest rates are higher now. So they're just defaulting. And it's also starting to creep in on auto loans. The only place we're really not seeing defaults yet, and hopefully we won't, is on mortgages.
Yeah.
So that's a little side note. So understand what we're seeing. What do you think what's your thoughts there? Anything to add?
No, I think I like that story because I think we've all been there.
Yeah.
We've all had that moment of being unsatisfied with where we're at for one reason or the other. And I think that perspective of talking to him and saying, man, you got different goals here, than potentially this person that you're so angry about or angry at the world or whatever's going on.
Yeah.
You've got a different plan that you've picked. So focus on what you can control is kind of the thought that jumps into my head.
Absolutely. And, kind of moving on, but in that same breath. So we're fighting this uphill battle because we're seeing where this stuff is being reinforced, dug in, and even intensified by way of social media. We sometimes get caught up in the emotion and we forget to be like, oh yeah, I'm looking at somebody, I'm seeing a moment of happiness in their life.
Yeah.
I shouldn't assume that they're actually happy.
Yeah.
We can't do that every time. And that's, it's understandable. We're human beings, but other things that are kind of fighting against us here is the fact that we live in this consumer-based society.
Yeah.
Our whole economy is built on the idea that we're all consumers and we're all contributors to the economy.
Yeah.
So to participate, it's growing and making us more and more materialistic. There's a couple thoughts when it comes to materialism and this notion of envy is, Bill, if I see you doing something great with your life and I perceive that you're happy and I perceive all these things, and even if I know I have a financial path and I'm working hard towards these very specific goals, sometimes they're so far away that I end up get tired from telling myself, stay on your path. No, don't go to Amazon and don't click that thing because your body needs this little dose of dopamine.
Yeah.
Say no to that. And I can say no once and I can say no twice and 3 times, but man, come Friday afternoon and I'm tired. I'm on my couch and tired from life, tired from, it's just man, yeah, I want that still. Click.
Yeah.
Right. And that little dose of dopamine gives me that moment where I feel like what you looked like in your Instagram story.
Yeah.
Right. That little moment makes me feel equal to everyone else that's happy. And it's not pretend, it's legitimate chemicals going through my body.
Yeah.
Because we've been trained to do this stuff. Something really important to note here is that there are significant studies out there that suggest that these little dopamine highs, by feeding our materialism, if that's our solution to envy, it's actually cultivating something inside us. And this is psychology that I don't entirely know. I just read. But the studies suggest that through these little short dopamine hits that we give ourselves by clicking, on the buy now or going on the little, retail therapy kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It actually leads us into a place of deeper unhappiness
Sure.
and even potentially depression.
Yeah.
If we feed ourselves that way for long enough.
Yeah.
So it's just really, really important to know, if we're not aware of how to solve the envy problem, and we don't do it the right way, we could actually lead ourselves into like depression and sadness and unhappiness, not just a little bit of envy from time to time.
Yeah.
That being said, too, I was talking pre-show, like that doesn't mean don't ever like go buy yourself something nice. Like it does feel good. What's the last thing that you think that you can think of that you bought that made you happy?
Last thing that I bought.
You keep thinking about it. I'm going to tell my story. So I've told, like I have a couple certain benchmarks in my business. Some of them are related to like, very like income kind of things, revenue generating things. And some of them are actually just based on like how I make my clients feel. And with each different achievement comes a reward, right? Some of them are small. Some of them I give my permission to like waste a little bit of money. And I say waste, it's like stuff that I typically want. I love it. I enjoy it. It's hobby driven or something I've just been thinking about for a long time. But based on these certain things, I let myself go do it. Why is that so important to differentiate than just being kind of down in the dumps, envious of other people? So this weekend, I went and bought a pair of boots. And I hit a milestone about a month ago, and I just haven't had time to go do it. But I went downtown and bought a pair of new boots. And what's really cool about the reason and like why now, these boots, every time I put them on, it reminds me of the success that I had.
Yeah.
So not only do I get the little, like it was fun, nice pair of boots. They kind of like treat you like royalty when you walk into their shop in downtown Nashville.
Yeah.
And, they pour you a little like glass of, I had a pour of tequila and they're like, showing you all this stuff and
Brilliant.
It's flattering.
Strategy.
Oh man. It's a real great experience. So I had the experience. I got the little like dopamine hit of putting on the fresh boots. And, but now also because I earned it.
Yeah.
Now, every time I put that on, I'm like, this is because I had success. This is because I treated someone in the right way, had impact. It contributed to me, like, on the revenue side financially, but it also made this person feel safer, better, happier, healthier, whatever the case may be. So that was the last thing I bought that made me feel good. Have you thought of yours?
I was just wrapped up in your story, to be honest with you. One of the things, the one time I did buy a pair of sunglasses when I hit a Mark II. I used to sell sunglasses. Nice. And so I bought myself a really nice pair of my favorite kind of sunglasses. And I've had them for now 4 or 5 years at this point. But it's still like I won't put another pair of sunglasses on my face. I love it. And to your point, I do think about that every time. The only other thought that comes to mind is sometimes people, will think of non-material things to do. Maybe they'll say, I'll go on a trip or maybe I'll take a day off. And what's interesting about that is we're trying to, get people to be aware of materialism, which, in a lot of cases does lead to envy. But at the same time, if it's something that you use every day, like a pair of sunglasses or a pair of boots or something, you can, in a way, reinforce that positive impact of setting that goal and getting to that thing and remembering, hey, I worked hard and I treated myself a little bit with these boots. Yeah. And so now I get to wear those every day, or now I get to wear my sunglasses every day. And I do think about the goal that I hit very often when I put those sunglasses on.
Yeah.
And
we actually have a podcast back in season 1. I'll put this in the notes too, but it's called Buy Nice Things and Save Money.
Yeah.
And the whole notion is if you set your eyes on like the nice thing, one, it's quality, it's going to last, but 2, you're going to work hard to, be able to purchase it. Just another thought there.
Yeah. And I think, I think taking a day off or taking a vacation in those cases can be good. The only thought I have is maybe for me, it may not work just because I'll forget why I took the vacation sometimes. maybe you could like get a photo or something to memorize, remember the vacation.
Yeah, I just put a short on my socials, and specifically the idea I was like, you need to have like this thing I call it a win journal, like WIN.
Yeah.
And in the journal, you need to write like your win down, because we don't celebrate ourselves enough. But how did you celebrate it? Like, what did you do? Because that will tie the memories together, like what you're saying.
Yeah.
And then when you're feeling envious or down in the dumps, you can go back and read pages and pages of everything that you've had success in your life, and it'll kind of pull you up there.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be a good thing to put something from a vacation or something into.
Yeah.
Just the positive. I'm just looking for a way to like find how to leave the positive impact of that materialism of going out and treating yourself. That needs to be treat yourself. It's got to be more accessible than being easily forgettable sometimes.
Absolutely. We're going to move on. So wrapping up kind of what is envy, just understanding that envy is detrimental to ourselves. It also can completely ruin relationships. It fosters feelings of resentment, competition. Instead of those things, if you're noticing that, try to replace it with like empathy and championing others.
Championing.
Yeah. So if we can find out how to break free of envy, again, not ever not feel envious, because that's impossible.
Right.
But if we're starting to feel envious, how can we break free? If we can break free and be aware and get out of it as quick as possible, it promotes contentment. Mm-hmm. And if we shift our focus from comparing ourselves to others to focusing on our own like gratitude and contentment, and focusing on celebrating the people around us and the moments that we have, if we can read our win journals, that is how we can facilitate a faster path to financial well-being and emotional fulfillment. We have to be able to recognize our strengths. We have to be able to embrace our imperfections, which is, hard for me to do sometimes. I don't do well. So that's something I have to work on very intentionally.
Sure.
But, if we just focus on our own personal growth and focus on our own stuff there, that's how, or that's what the reward. So we're going to end with wrapping up on like some active steps to break free from the envy trap. Okay.
Sure.
So I'm walking through life. I turn on social media, see Bill's fancy whatever. I start to get a little envious immediately, because I'm listening to money therapy and it's helping me out tremendously.
Of course.
I start to realize, hey, I think this is envy. Mm-hmm. It doesn't feel good to admit it. I'm not happy I feel this way. But what I've done is I've created a checklist of like a standard operating procedure in to getting to breaking free of the envy trap.
Yeah.
In fighter pilots, they're changing like their scenery, they're changing their situation, they're changing everything about when they're flying fighting like a jet. Things are changing at a mile or miles per second.
Yeah.
Right. Their altitude, if they're in a dogfight, where's the bad guy, right? All these things. So the fighter pilots have this constant loop that they're trained in. So anytime something happens, they immediately default. It's a learned, like they train it to be an instinct, like a reaction called the OODA loop. The OODA loop is, and this was all just top of mind that came to me just now, but it's orient, something, decide, and act. Orient, observe, orient, decide, and act. I might be messing that up if you're a fighter pilot. I apologize. You can write me a note, teach me what it is. But the OODA loop's very, very important, and because if I'm flying a jet and all of a sudden an enemy fighter pilot gets on my 6 and I got now I'm freaking out. Where's my altitude? at what point am I getting too close to, the floor, or where do I need to go? OODA loop, right? Orient, or observe, orient, decide, act, and it constantly just staying on. If I break right, okay, observe what just happened, orient myself, decide again, act. Okay, I'm gonna straighten out. I'm gonna roll left, whatever.
Yeah.
And that's what we need. So when I realize I'm in the envy trap, I need my own version of the OODA loop that I can be like, okay, boom, what do I need to do to break free of this? And those things are, first, take a second to just reflect on what has triggered your envy, right?
Sure.
So why am I feeling it? What was I just doing? And what have I been doing? Once I realized I was feeling envy, and then also take a brief second in that moment, or in the moments, or when you realize it, when you have a second, to say, okay, what was I actually feeling, and how did it affect me as a person? I was, bitter. I was angry. I was really like being small. Like it didn't feel good.
Right.
Then we're going to step, once we acknowledge and write that stuff, because that's how we learn about ourselves, right? Figuring out our triggers, figuring out how we feel about these things. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take a moment to practice gratitude and contentment. Practicing this stuff, like I said, we talked about the win journal, great example. I write down all my wins. I write down all my successes, even things that are just like happened to me that were good that I really wasn't part of. Mm-hmm. I'm going to write them down. So this is a great way to practice gratitude and contentment, just to go back and look at like all the success we've had. Mm-hmm. You can journal things you're thankful for, talk about like those things that you love. Like I love my daughter immensely. So I can just take a moment to write down why I love her so much, and why she makes me so proud and so happy. These things are just quick practices, quick things that we can do. It can take 5 minutes. It can take 2 minutes.
Yeah.
To just practice that gratitude and contentment. The next thing that we're going to do is either set or reflect on our own personal financial goals. And once we reflect, or once we set those personal financial goals, we're going to realize how important they are to us. And we're going to realize, hey, that fancy thing that Bill has might be put on the credit card, and I'm not willing to do that. So obviously he can have the nice thing, and I'm just not going to have it. I'm not envious now. I'm actually proud that I'm making this decision for me and my family and my future. Mm-hmm. A big trigger that we're all being sucked into is social media. So, limiting that exposure is important. You can take social media fast, like either in the evenings or on weekends, or I know a bunch of people right now, because the church down here is promoting this 30-day social media fast. These are all ways to kind of, again, limit that exposure.
Sure.
And then the last thing, again, is to embrace that concept of enough. Like it's okay to just be like, I already have enough.
Yeah.
I'm super, super okay with where I'm at in life. What I have, the people around me are phenomenal.
Yeah.
I have people that love me. I love people.
You live in the South and you have air conditioning.
And that is enough, right?
Just saying.
Yeah. So any final thoughts there?
No, I think again, to wrap up, recognize what's happening and why you're feeling the way you are. Make a choice on how you want to deal with that and how you want to, choose your own future. And hopefully you choose gratitude and introspectively look at your life and what you can be happy for, and how can I find contentment out of any of these situations.
Yeah. The envy trap will drive you to make financial mistakes. You will become more and more materialistic, because it's real science. Like, you need the dopamine. Once you have this dopamine, and you get these, it's almost like a drug. You kind of get addicted to it, and the withdrawal is, when you don't have it, when you can't get it again, it's depression. It's real sadness, and so then it's just harder to break that cycle. Having your clear financial goals that are yours and you're passionate about them, prioritizing the things that you love, and just focusing on those. And again, just knowing we're all human beings. I'm going to be envious. You're going to be envious. We're all going to be envious. But now we got our own version of that OODA loop to say, hey, when I feel this, I'm going to this checklist. I'm going to do these things, and I'm going to break free of the enemy trap. That's all I got.
There you go.
Sweet. See y'all next week. We hope you learned something valuable today. We appreciate you including us in your journey towards financial betterment. It is important to us that you know this is for educational purposes only and not to be considered specific advice for any individual listener. If something we discussed is relevant to you and you have questions about how it might be uniquely applicable to you, please discuss that with a financial professional, or, of course, we are happy to have further conversations with you about your specific questions, needs, or circumstances. We welcome you to reach out to us via our website, harpethwealthpartners.com, or by emailing Brandan at bmc@harpethwealthpartners.com. Securities are offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advice is offered through Private Advisor Group, a registered investment advisor. Private Advisor Group and Harpeth Wealth Partners are separate entities from LPL Financial. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not to be intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult appropriate qualified professionals prior to making a decision. Investing includes risk, including fluctuating prices and loss of principal. No strategy assures success or protects against loss. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Hypothetical examples presented are not representative of any specific investments. Your results may vary. We want to thank you for your time, and we look forward to having you back next week.